I've been working on Japanese imports for 14 years, and the single biggest misconception I hear from American Toyota and Lexus owners is that their cars are lasting forever because Japanese engineering is just that good. That's only half the story. The other half is what nobody wants you to know. In 2018, I spent 3 weeks at a vehicle auction house in Osaka. I watched perfectly maintained 10-year-old Camrys, Corollas, and Lexus sedans roll through with odometers showing 80,000 to 120,000 kilometers. These cars looked showroom fresh, paint was flawless, interiors smelled new. I popped the hood on a 2008 Crown Athlete. The engine bay was cleaner than most American cars at 30,000 miles. When I asked why these cars were being retired, the auction manager looked at me like I'd asked why water is wet. In Japan, the cost of keeping a car past 10 years becomes prohibitive because of a system called Shaken. But here's what hit me. These cars weren't being retired because they were wearing out. They were being retired because the Japanese maintenance culture had kept them in such perfect condition that the only reason to get rid of them was regulatory pressure. Same Toyota, same Lexus. But in America we drive these cars differently, and more importantly, we maintain them differently. By the time an American Camry hits 10 years, it's often showing wear that a Japanese Camry of the same age simply doesn't have. And when I get to number 7, you're going to understand why the way you're changing your oil right now is leaving performance on the table. If you want your Toyota or Lexus to run like a Japanese domestic model, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't in any American owner's manual. Here's why this gap exists. American maintenance schedules are written with one priority: convenience. The intervals are stretched as long as legally possible so that ownership feels effortless. Oil changes every 10,000 miles, transmission fluid labeled lifetime, spark plugs rated for 120,000 miles. These intervals aren't based on what's best for the car, they're based on what's easy to sell. A longer interval means fewer trips to the dealer, which makes the ownership experience feel low maintenance. But there's a hidden cost. Components wear faster, fluids break down. By 100,000 miles, the car is aging in ways that could have been prevented. And the dealership isn't hurt by this. They don't make money on oil changes. They make money on transmission replacements, on engine rebuilds, on the big repairs that happen when small maintenance gets skipped. I'm not saying they want your car to fail, I'm saying the system isn't designed to prevent it. In Japan, the philosophy is completely different. Maintenance is about preservation, not convenience. The goal is to keep every system operating as close to factory spec as possible for as long as the car is on the road. Shorter intervals, higher quality fluids, more frequent inspections, it costs more per year. But the car at 200,000 miles looks and drives like the car at 50,000 miles. That's not an accident. That's a system built around a different set of priorities. What I'm about to show you is how to maintain your Toyota or Lexus the way a Japanese owner would, not the way the American manual says you can get away with. The way that actually keeps the car in the condition that made you buy a Toyota in the first place. 1. Engine oil. Toyota says you can go 10,000 miles between oil changes if you're using synthetic. In Japan, no one waits that long. The standard interval for a Japanese Toyota owner is 5,000 kilometers, which is about 3,000 miles. Some owners of turbocharged models or vehicles used in city traffic go even shorter, down to 2,500 miles. This isn't about the oil failing completely at 10,000 miles. It's about what happens to the oil between 5,000 and 10,000 miles. Synthetic oil doesn't just lubricate, it carries away combustion byproducts, it suspends metal particles, and it prevents sludge from forming on internal engine surfaces. After 5,000 miles, the additives that prevent sludge start to weaken. The oil is still slippery, but it's not cleaning the way it did when it was fresh. I've torn apart engines with 80,000 miles that followed the 10,000-mile interval. The valve covers had visible sludge. The timing chain area showed buildup. Then I opened up a Lexus ES with 150,000 miles that had been on a 3,000-mile interval its whole life. The inside of that engine looked like it had 30,000 miles on it. Clean metal, no discoloration. The math is simple. An oil change costs $60 if you do it yourself, $90 at a shop. Doing it every 3,000 miles instead of every 10,000 means you're spending an extra $180 to $270 per year. That's less than one car payment. And you're preventing the kind of internal wear that leads to oil consumption, rough idle, and eventually engine replacement. The reason Toyota doesn't tell you this in the American manual is because a 3,000-mile interval sounds old-fashioned. It sounds like overkill. It makes the car seem high maintenance, but the engineers who designed your engine, they change their oil every 5,000 kilometers, not because they're paranoid, because they've seen what happens when you don't. 2. Transmission fluid. Transmission fluid is labeled as lifetime in most American Toyota and Lexus models. In Japan, that label doesn't exist. The recommended interval for a Japanese market Toyota is 40,000 kilometers, which works out to about 25,000 miles. For a Lexus or a vehicle with a lot of city driving, it's every 30,000 miles. This isn't a flush, it's a drain and fill. You drop the pan, replace the filter if the transmission has one, and refill with the exact fluid specified by Toyota. For most models, that's Toyota Genuine WS fluid, not Universal ATF, not a compatible equivalent. The exact fluid, transmission fluid, operates under extreme pressure and heat. It doesn't just lubricate gears, it actuates clutches, controls shift timing, and manages the torque converter lockup. As it ages, it darkens. That discoloration isn't just dirt, it's friction material from the clutch packs breaking down. It's metal particles from gears wearing against each other. It's the fluid itself losing viscosity and starting to behave differently under pressure. When that happens, shifts get harsh. The transmission hesitates. Eventually, clutch packs start slipping and the whole unit has to be replaced. I've pulled transmission pans at 60,000 miles on vehicles that never had the fluid changed. The bottom of the pan looked like someone had sprinkled metal glitter in old coffee. Then I pulled a pan on a 2007 RX 350 with 280,000 miles. The owner had done a drain and fill every 30,000 miles like clockwork. The fluid was still red. The pan was clean. That transmission shifted as smoothly at 280,000 as it did at 28,000. A drain and fill costs about $150 at an independent shop, $250 at the dealer. A transmission replacement is $4,500 to $6,000. The interval isn't in the American manual because calling the fluid lifetime makes the car sound more advanced, more maintenance-free. But in Japan, where people actually keep cars in service for decades, no one believes in lifetime fluid. They know better. 3. Engine air filter. Your air filter isn't just keeping dirt out of the engine. It's controlling airflow, and airflow affects fuel mixture, throttle response, and how the engine breathes under load. Toyota's American service schedule says inspect the air filter every 30,000 miles and replace it as needed. In Japan, the interval is much shorter. Most Japanese owners replace the air filter every 20,000 kilometers, about 12,000 miles, regardless of how it looks. This seems wasteful until you understand what a partially clogged filter does. It doesn't fail suddenly. It restricts airflow gradually. The engine pulls harder to get the air it needs. The computer compensates by adjusting fuel trim, which means you're burning more fuel for the same power output. Throttle response gets sluggish. On turbocharged engines, the turbo works harder to pull air through the restriction, which increases heat and wear. A clean air filter costs $20 to $40 depending on the model. You can replace it yourself in under 5 minutes. There are no tools required on most Toyotas. You just pop the clips on the airbox and swap it. I've tested this on my own vehicles. I put a fresh filter in a Tacoma that had been running on the same filter for 25,000 miles. The filter didn't look terrible, but the moment I started the truck with the new filter, throttle response sharpened. The engine revved more freely. I checked fuel economy over the next 2 tanks. It improved by 1.2 miles per gallon. That's $80 a year in fuel savings on a truck that gets driven 15,000 miles annually. The filter paid for itself twice over. You won't hear this from a dealership because air filters are a low-margin service. They'd rather sell you the 30,000-mile interval and move on to something more profitable. But Japanese owners treat the air filter as a consumable, not a long-term part. They replace it on a schedule because they know a clean engine breathes better, runs stronger, and lasts longer. If you want your Toyota or Lexus to hit 300,000 miles with the interior of the engine still looking factory fresh, I've put together a complete Japanese maintenance schedule for the most common Toyota and Lexus models. It's organized by mileage interval. It lists the exact fluids with part numbers. It tells you which services you can do yourself and which ones you should take to a shop. It's free. The link is in the description. This is the same schedule I follow on my own vehicles and the same one I hand to customers who want to know how to make their Toyota last. 4. Engine coolant. Coolant is one of the most ignored fluids in American car maintenance. Toyota's US schedule says the factory fill is good for 100,000 miles, then replace it every 50,000 after that. In Japan, the interval is 40,000 kilometers for the first change, about 25,000 miles, then every 20,000 kilometers after that, which is roughly every 12,000 miles. The reason for the shorter interval comes down to what coolant actually does. It doesn't just prevent overheating. It prevents corrosion inside the engine block, the radiator, the heater core, and the water pump. Toyota Red Coolant is a long-life formula, but long life doesn't mean forever. Over time, the corrosion inhibitors deplete. The coolant becomes acidic. Once that happens, it starts eating away at the aluminum components inside your cooling system. The water pump impeller corrodes. The radiator end tanks develop pinhole leaks. The heater core clogs. By the time you notice a problem, the damage is already done. I've seen 10-year-old Highlanders with 120,000 miles that never had a coolant change. The cooling system looked like it had spent a decade underwater. The radiator was clogged with sediment. The water pump had to be replaced not because the bearing failed, but because the impeller had corroded down to half its original size. Compare that to 2006 4Runner I serviced last year. It had 310,000 miles. The owner had changed the coolant every 25,000 miles from day one. I drained the system to replace a thermostat. The coolant came out bright red. The inside of the radiator was clean. The engine block showed no corrosion. A coolant flush costs about $120 at a shop. A radiator replacement is $400 to $600. A water pump is another $400 to $800 depending on the engine. The American interval exists because 100,000 miles sounds impressive. It makes the cooling system sound bulletproof. But the Japanese interval exists because Toyota engineers know that coolant degrades, and once it does, it stops protecting. The choice is whether you want to spend $120 every couple of years or $1,500 every decade when the whole cooling system starts failing at once. 5. Brake fluid. Your brake fluid absorbs moisture. It's hygroscopic, which means it pulls water vapor out of the air through microscopic gaps in the brake lines and the reservoir cap. The more moisture it absorbs, the lower its boiling point becomes. When you press the brakes hard, especially going downhill or in stop-and-go traffic, the fluid heats up. If the boiling point has dropped because of water contamination, the fluid can boil. When that happens, you get vapor in the lines. Vapor compresses, liquid doesn't. That's why your brake pedal goes to the floor. Most American Toyota owners never change their brake fluid. There's no interval in the maintenance schedule for it unless you read the fine print. In Japan, brake fluid is changed every 2 years or 40,000 kilometers, whichever comes first. This applies to every vehicle, not just performance cars. The reason is simple. Japanese owners don't wait for brake problems to develop, they prevent them. I've tested brake fluid on American Toyotas that were 5 years old. The fluid was dark brown, almost black. I used a test strip to measure the moisture content. It was over 4%. At that contamination level, the boiling point had dropped from 500 degrees to under 350 degrees. That's dangerous. Then I tested a Japanese import Lexus LS that was 7 years old. The owner had followed the 2-year interval. The fluid was almost clear. Moisture content was under 2%. Boiling point was still over 450 degrees. A brake fluid flush costs $80 to $120. It takes 20 minutes. The alternative is boiled fluid, a spongy pedal, and in the worst case, brake failure on a mountain road. But here's the other thing nobody talks about. Water in brake fluid also corrodes the internal components of your brake calipers, your master cylinder, and your ABS module. Once that corrosion starts, you're not just flushing fluid. You're replacing calipers at $200 each or an ABS module at $1,200. The American maintenance schedule doesn't include a brake fluid interval because it's not required by law, and it's one more thing that makes ownership sound complicated. But in Japan, it's as routine as an oil change. You do it because you want your brakes to work the same way at year 7 as they did at year 1. 6. Spark plugs. Spark plugs on modern Toyotas are often rated for 120,000 miles in the American market. In Japan, the standard replacement interval is 100,000 kilometers, which is about 60,000 miles. For vehicles with turbocharged engines or direct injection, some Japanese owners replace them even sooner, around 40,000 miles. The plugs don't fail completely at 60,000 miles, but they don't fire the same way they did when they were new. The electrode wears down, the gap widens, the spark becomes weaker and less consistent. When that happens, combustion becomes less efficient, you lose power, fuel economy drops. In some cases, you'll get a misfire under load that doesn't trigger a check engine light, but you can feel as a hesitation when you accelerate. I've pulled spark plugs at 100,000 miles from a Camry V6 that followed the American interval. The electrodes were worn down to nubs. The gap had opened up to nearly double the factory spec. The tip of the plug was covered in carbon deposits. That engine was misfiring intermittently, but the owner didn't know it because it only happened under hard acceleration. I replaced the plugs. Immediately, the engine ran smoother. Throttle response improved. Fuel economy went up by about 8% over the next few tanks. Compare that to a Lexus GS 350 I worked on with 180,000 miles. The owner had replaced the spark plugs every 60,000 miles. When I pulled the old set at 180,000, they still looked decent. Electrode wear was minimal. The engine had no misfires, no hesitation, no loss of power. A set of 6 spark plugs for a V6 costs $60 to $90. Installation takes about 45 minutes if you're doing it yourself, or $150 to $200 at a shop. Replacing them at 60,000 miles instead of 120,000 means you're doing the job twice as often, but you're also keeping the engine running at peak efficiency the entire time. Japanese owners don't wait for plugs to fail. They replace them while they're still working because they know that slightly worn plugs cost you money and fuel every time you drive. The 120,000-mile interval exists because it sounds low maintenance and high tech. But it's not optimized for performance, it's optimized for marketing. 7. Cabin air filter. Your cabin air filter has nothing to do with the engine, but it has everything to do with the air you're breathing inside the car and the performance of your HVAC system. Toyota's American schedule says inspect it every 25,000 miles and replace it as needed. In Japan, it's replaced every 20,000 kilometers, about 12,000 miles, no inspection required. A clogged cabin filter doesn't just make the air smell stale, it restricts airflow through the vents. Your air conditioning has to work harder to cool the cabin. Your heater has to work harder to warm it. The blower motor runs at higher speed to push air through the restriction, which wears it out faster. I've seen cabin filters on American Toyotas that hadn't been changed in 50,000 miles. The filter media was black with dirt, pollen, and debris. When I held it up to a light, almost no light came through. The owner had been complaining that the AC wasn't blowing cold and the heater wasn't blowing hot. I replaced the filter. Airflow doubled. The AC started working again. The heater actually got uncomfortable because it was blowing so much hot air. The blower motor, which had been screaming at high speed, ran quietly. A cabin air filter costs $12 to $25 depending on the model. You can replace it yourself in under 3 minutes on most Toyotas. It's behind the glove box. You don't need tools, but most American owners don't even know it exists until a mechanic tries to upsell them on it during an oil change. In Japan, it's treated as a consumable. You replace it on a schedule because clean air matters and because a $15 filter protects a $300 blower motor. The long American interval exists because cabin filters aren't safety critical and they're easy to forget. But if you've ever wondered why your vents don't blow as hard as they used to, this is why. 8. Differential fluid. Differential fluid is one of the most neglected services on trucks and SUVs. If you own a 4Runner, Tacoma, Tundra GX, or LX, your vehicle has at least one differential, and if it's four-wheel drive, it has two plus a transfer case. Toyota's American schedule says inspect the fluid at major service intervals and change it if it's dirty. No specific mileage is given for most models. In Japan, differential fluid is changed every 40,000 kilometers, about 25,000 miles across the board. The fluid doesn't just lubricate the gears. It handles extreme pressure and heat every time you accelerate, tow, or drive off-road. As it ages, it breaks down. The additives that prevent metal-to-metal contact wear out. The gears start to whine. The differential gets hot. Eventually, the ring and pinion gears wear out and you're looking at a full rebuild. I've drained differential fluid from a Tacoma with 90,000 miles that had never been serviced. The fluid came out black and smelled burnt. When I poured it through a filter, there was metal sediment at the bottom. That differential was already on borrowed time. Then I serviced a 2005 Land Cruiser with 420,000 miles. The owner had changed the front and rear differential fluid every 30,000 miles since new. The fluid came out clean. Slight discoloration but no burnt smell, no metal particles. Those differentials were still running quietly with no whine, no heat, no issues. A differential service costs about $100 to $150 per axle. A differential rebuild is $1,500 to $2,500. The American manual doesn't give you a specific interval because it makes the truck sound high maintenance, and it's one more service that customers will skip if it's not required. But in Japan, where Tacomas and Land Cruisers are driven hard and expected to last 20 years, differential fluid is considered as important as engine oil. You change it because you want the drivetrain to outlast the body. 9. Intake valve carbon cleaning. Engine air induction systems, particularly on direct injection engines, develop carbon buildup on the intake valves over time. This happens because direct injection sprays fuel directly into the combustion chamber, bypassing the intake valves. In a port injection engine, fuel washes over the valves and keeps them clean. In a direct injection engine, the valves never get that cleaning. Oil vapor from the PCV system bakes onto the back of the valves and turns into hard carbon. Most American Toyota owners don't even know this is happening until the engine starts running rough, misfiring, or losing power. By that point, the buildup is severe. A walnut blast cleaning costs $400 to $600. In Japan, owners of direct injection Toyotas and Lexus models use a preventive approach. Every 20,000 to 30,000 kilometers, they run an induction cleaning service or they use a high-quality fuel system cleaner designed to reduce carbon formation. Some owners also install an oil catch can to reduce the amount of oil vapor reaching the intake. I've scoped the intake valves on a 2015 IS 350 with 90,000 miles that had never had any carbon cleaning. The valves were caked with buildup. Some of them had lost 30% of their airflow. The engine had a slight misfire at idle and hesitation on acceleration. We did a walnut blast cleaning. Afterward, the engine idled smooth. Throttle response sharpened. Fuel economy improved by about 6%. Then I scoped a 2014 GS 350 with 110,000 miles. The owner had been using a high-quality fuel additive every 5,000 miles and had done an induction cleaning at 60,000 miles. The valves had some buildup, but it was minimal. The engine ran perfectly. The American maintenance schedule doesn't mention carbon buildup because it's not a failure, it's a gradual loss of performance. But in Japan, where owners expect their engines to perform like new even at high mileage, carbon cleaning is part of the routine. You don't wait for symptoms. You prevent the problem before it costs you power and money. 10. Tire rotation. Tire rotations in America are recommended every 5,000 to 7,500 miles. In Japan, the interval is shorter, around 5,000 kilometers or 3,000 miles, and it's treated as non-negotiable. This isn't just about even tread wear. It's about handling, braking, and making sure your tires last as long as possible. Tires don't wear evenly. The front tires on a front-wheel drive car wear faster on the outer edges because of cornering forces. The rear tires on a rear-wheel drive car wear faster in the center because of acceleration forces. If you don't rotate them, you end up replacing tires in pairs or even all four at once because the wear is so uneven that you can't just replace the worst ones. I've seen American Camrys with 40,000 miles on the original tires where the fronts were bald and the rears still had half tread left. The owner had to replace all four tires because you can't run mismatched tread depths without affecting stability and ABS function. That's $800 for a full set when they could have spent $100 over 3 years on rotations and gotten 60,000 miles out of the same tires. Then I've seen Japanese import Corollas with 80,000 miles on the second set of tires. The owner rotated them every 5,000 kilometers like clockwork. The wear was perfectly even. They got full life out of every tire. A tire rotation costs $20 to $40, or it's free if you go to the shop that sold you the tires. It takes 15 minutes, but most American drivers skip it because it feels like an inconvenience. In Japan, it's bundled into every oil change or done on a strict schedule because tires are expensive and uneven wear is a waste of money. You also won't hear dealerships push this service hard because they make more money selling you tires than rotating the ones you have. 11. Battery. Battery maintenance is something almost no one thinks about until the battery dies. In America, we treat batteries as a wear item that lasts 3 to 5 years, then we replace it. In Japan, batteries are tested and maintained regularly. Every 6 months, a Japanese Toyota owner will either test the battery themselves or have it tested during service. They check voltage, cranking amps, and the condition of the terminals. If the terminal connections are corroded, they clean them. If the battery is weak but not dead, they charge it or replace it before it fails. This seems excessive until you understand what a weak battery does to a modern vehicle. Your alternator has to work harder to keep a weak battery charged. That shortens the life of the alternator. A weak battery also causes voltage fluctuations that can affect sensitive electronics like the ECU, the infotainment system, and the body control modules. I've diagnosed electrical gremlins on Toyotas where the root cause was a battery that was still cranking the engine but couldn't hold a stable voltage. Replacing the battery fixed everything. A battery test takes 2 minutes and costs nothing at most auto parts stores. A new battery costs $120 to $200. An alternator replacement is $400 to $700. But the bigger issue is being stranded. I've seen American owners ignore a slow, cranking engine for months until the battery dies in a parking lot and they have to get towed. A Japanese owner would have replaced that battery the moment the starter sounded sluggish. The American approach is reactive. The Japanese approach is preventive. You don't wait for failure. You catch it early when it's cheap and convenient. 12. Fuel quality. Fuel quality matters more than most people realize. In Japan, top-tier fuel with detergent additives is the standard. Most Japanese Toyota and Lexus owners use premium fuel even in vehicles that only require regular, not because the engine needs the octane, but because premium fuel typically has better detergent packages that keep injectors and intake valves clean. In America, we run the cheapest gas we can find and wonder why fuel economy drops and performance suffers over time. Fuel injectors spray fuel in a precise pattern. As they accumulate deposits, that pattern degrades. You get incomplete combustion, rough idle, hesitation, and lower fuel economy. Carbon builds up in the combustion chamber, which raises compression and can cause knocking. Over time, this leads to sensor failures, misfires, and costly repairs. I've run fuel system cleaners through American Toyotas with 60,000 miles that had been running on cheap gas their whole lives. After a strong cleaning and switching to top-tier fuel, throttle response improved, idle smoothed out, and fuel economy came back. On some vehicles, we saw gains of 10% or more just from cleaning the fuel system and using better gas. In Japan, fuel quality is seen as part of maintenance, not just something you buy when you're empty. Using top-tier fuel costs about $2 more per tank. Over a year, that's maybe $50. But it prevents injector cleaning services that cost $150 to $300 and keeps your engine running the way it was designed to. You won't hear this from a dealership because they don't sell fuel. But Japanese owners treat fuel like a fluid, not just a commodity. The quality of what you put in determines how well everything else works. Japanese Toyota owners view maintenance as an investment in the vehicle, not an expense they try to minimize. They spend $400 to $600 per year on preventive maintenance to avoid spending $3,000 to $6,000 on repairs that result from deferred maintenance. The car at 200,000 miles runs like the car at 50,000 miles because every system has been kept in near perfect condition from day one. The American approach is to follow the longest possible intervals, skip services that aren't required, and fix things when they break. That approach works if you're leasing or trading in every few years. But if you want your Toyota or Lexus to hit 300,000 or 400,000 miles, the Japanese approach is the only one that gets you there. You can maintain it like the Japanese do, or you can repair it like Americans have to. The difference is whether you're spending a little bit consistently or a lot all at once when something major fails. Drop a comment and tell me what your current mileage is, and which of these services you're adding to your schedule. I read every single one. And if you want to know why Japanese Lexus owners almost never have to replace their alternators while American ones do, that's the next video. The reason has to do with a part that costs $8 and takes 5 minutes to inspect, but almost no one in America ever checks it until the alternator dies and leaves them with an $800 bill. I'll see you there.